You're watching Between the Lines with your host, Dan Gray.
Welcome to Between the Lines. I'm here with Michael Landsberg, the founder of Sick Not Weak. Thanks for joining me today, Michael. How are you?
Hey, Dan, I'm great. Thank you for asking me. And I'm done with you now. I'm going to talk for the next 7.5 minutes. Then I'm going to throw to commercial, then do it again, then throw to commercial, and then I'll wrap it up. So thanks for coming out.
Well, if you want to play it that way, we can play it that way. But I think I have a few questions before you can talk. So
I would much rather be asked questions than ask them. I've spent all my life asking questions. It's way more fun to be able to answer them. So fire away anything you got. And you should know we're talking mental health. I mean, we're talking mental health. You chose that. But you should know that nothing is off limits for me. Nothing.
Sounds fine to me. So let's start with, you founded Sick Not Weak. What is Sick Not Weak?
Sick Not Weak is, it's now a charity. We launched as a not-for-profit, then started applying for charity status to the CRA. The goal is to show people that mental illness is a sickness, not a weakness. And if you could do that one thing, if people all across Canada could decide, oh, mental illness, okay, I understand. It's like diabetes, it's like cancer, it's like rheumatoid arthritis, it's like all of those things. You don't will it upon yourself, you don't choose it, it chooses you. You can't will it away. It's exactly like physical illnesses. In fact, I would say that mental illness, like depression, which is what I know best, depression and anxiety, are physical illnesses of the brain. But we've chosen to call them mental illness, and that feeds into the stigma. So the goal of Sick Not Weak is to basically say, accept it. Mental illnesses like depression and anxiety are sicknesses, not a weakness. And you notice how I said it. I said it with strength. I said it in a way that you would not go, he kind of sounds embarrassed or ashamed. So that's what we do.
So I'm looking at that, and we have this issue in the Soo where people are tying addictions to mental health, which is a fairly good strength and pretty good tie to draw. We're trying to find different words for, like, mental health is a mental illness. So how do you define addiction then? If you're going to be like addiction and somebody's an addict and you look down on them, and that's not the way it should be. We should be looking at them a different way. How do you define something like that?
Well, I think the name addiction, unfortunately, has connotations about it, just like the name depression has, 100 years of people looking at it and saying, come on, like, what do you have to be depressed about? So these words engender reactions in people that I think really feed into the stigma and make it more difficult for people to share. If you're addicted to cocaine, it's very difficult to use the words to say, I have an addiction to a drug. That word addiction is difficult to say, and we should find much easier ways for people to communicate that don't require them sort of taking a deep breath and swallowing and going, I'm an addict, because this should be technically as easy as we can make it, because that first step of sharing with someone is the absolute most important step, right? Because if you don't share with anyone, you're never getting better. Addiction has, I think we've done a pretty good job with addiction, learning how people who are alcoholics, for instance, are not losers. They're not people that are dissatisfied with their lives. They're not people that hate their lives. But they're people, for the most part, who have a mental health issue, and often it's depression or anxiety. And they have chosen to self-medicate through the use of alcohol. And I think we appreciate that way more than we did 25 years ago.
But if we look at that, and we look at the person that self-medicates with alcohol, we call them an alcoholic. We understand they have an illness. It's alcoholism, and society has almost come to accept that as but yet again, you have the 31. Unfortunately, we just had a 30-something-year-old female overdose on whatever it was her drug of choice, and it seems like there's almost like, and it sounds so bad, like different levels of addiction or different levels of that. Like you said, there's a connotation put to that word where you're addicted to alcohol. It's kind of accepted. You're addicted to a hard drug, and it becomes a bit of an issue.
Well, I mean, let's face it, the law has, in a lot of ways, created that. Alcohol is not illegal. And yet by far the most damaging of all of the drugs that you would self-medicate with, by far the most dangerous and the most deadly is alcohol, yet it's the most legal. So I think the law has created a certain stigma around saying, you know, I'm addicted to cocaine, for instance, because that's illegal and it is looked at because people then project, well, how did you get that? Did you buy it on the street? You know, what kind of person goes on the street and buys drugs? It's, you know, the need is to wipe the whole slate clean when it comes to anything that qualifies as self-medication, and not to make it easier for people to get, but make it easier for people to get help. And the ability to get help depends on your perception of your illness. If you are ashamed of your illness, then the chances of you reaching out to someone are a lot less. If you are worried about how you're going to be looked at because of the stigma or how the law is going to handle you, all of these things, whether you're going to compromise your future by saying I'm addicted to an illegal drug, all of these things are massive hurdles that get in the way of the addict, this person who is living a life of misery, this person who is, who in sober times would understand just how damaging their addiction is and how much it hurts people around them. Yet if they could stop, they would. No one wants to be addicted. No one goes, oh man, like the best thing for me is this addiction. But the lure of it is so great that the high outweighs the low in your mind when you're feeling low. Does that make sense to you?
Because I come from a background in mental addiction, that makes lots of sense to me, because there are days where doing one thing is difficult, like and finding that balance, right? Anyway, I'm here with Michael Landsberg and we're on Between the Lines, and we will be back after this short break. Thanks for joining me for Between the Lines. I'm with Michael Landsberg. We were talking about addiction here just before we went to break there, Mike. I know you wanted to add something else to it. What were you thinking?
Yeah, you know, I've never really had a problem with addiction. I was close when it came to benzodiazepines, Ativan, Valium, Xanax. When I was really, really sick, this would have been the last time that I fell into the deep, dark hole of depression. It was set off by massive out of control anxiety. And the problem with medication, like the problem with alcohol, the problem with all of these self-medicating drugs is, in the short term, they work. And that is a huge issue, because you go, oh God, I'm like, my chest is going to explode. I can't relax. I can't think of anything but these fears that I have in my head. You know, I'm catastrophizing everything. I am like so on edge. You know, I'm going to take an Ativan, and you take an Ativan and 20 minutes later you feel better. Well, now you're screwed, because it's wearing off after 4 hours, and you go, oh, I felt some relief. You know, it's not like it cured me. I want that relief again. So you go back to the Ativan. And then after 3 weeks of doing that, you realize the 0.5 milligram dose that you were putting sublingual doesn't work anymore. So you go up to 1. And then after another month, you go up to 2. It's the fact that it does bring us relief, whether it's alcohol or Ativan or anything else. But here's the thing. When you're in pain, when you're in real mental pain, you will do anything to feel better, regardless of the long-term effects. So if you say to an alcoholic, hey, if you drink that bottle of scotch, you're going to feel better, but then you're going to increase your addiction, and tomorrow you're going to feel terrible, and it's going to be harder to break away. It's like, no, I don't care. I don't care about tomorrow. I got to get through the next 3 hours.
So what is your story? Like we refer to, like, if anybody's followed you, I haven't. We know you've had depression and anxiety, but how, let's just talk about your story a little bit when it comes to this mental health.
My story is, and I'll try to do it in 60 seconds. Can you start a timer on me?
Sure, why not?
Okay. Well, you know what? I've spent my life taking counts, right? I mean, that's what you do as a broadcaster. You know, it's not 59, it's not 101, it's 60 seconds. So
as I'm learning.
Yeah. So here's my life story. I grew up in an amazing home. My parents adored me. They gave me every bit of love imaginable. I felt safe and secure, but I never talked about my anxiety because I thought, like this is either embarrassing or this is something that everyone goes through because you've never lived in anyone else's brain. So I had all of these fears when I was young that I never truly dealt with. And then about 20 years ago, I fell into the deepest, darkest hole that I could ever imagine with depression. And it was brought on by extreme anxiety, which continues to be my pattern. And there was this moment of recognition for me, Dan, where I went, oh my God, this is 1,000 times worse than anything I ever imagined. It was like I wanted to go to apologize to everybody who's ever suffered from depression. And I thought, how bad can it be? And that was 20 years ago. My last big fall into the darkest imaginable hole was in Montreal, 2008, November 24th, shooting off the record at the Grey Cup Marriott Hotel, room 521, 4 a.m. in the morning. And that was the low point for me. And since then, I've been on 2 or 3 medications at a time. And even though I don't like being on medication, that told me that date, that room, that time, that I can't not be on something.
So a minute 40, but we won't go there.
Yeah, you know what? You weren't giving me a count, so I knew.
My apologies. We were. So when we talk about like that's your journey, what does mental health then mean to you as a statement? Like I know we talked about what Sick Now Week is, but in a few words, what does mental health mean to you?
Oh, mental health means that I cherish normal in a way that I would never cherish normal. No one ever goes, wow, I feel so normal unless they've had it taken away. So on a day like today, when I feel really good, as good as I can feel, which is not as good as I could have felt before because medication kind of squeezes down my range of ability to feel. But on a day like this, I cherish it. I don't walk around going, hey, everybody, I'm cherishing my mental health, but I'm saying it to myself. It's exactly like if you had an accident and you lost the ability to walk and you went to rehab and for 2 years you rehabbed. And at the end of 2 years, you could walk normally. Every step that you took, you would value, you would cherish, right? Because you know what it's like not to be able to do it. And I look at my life with mental health when I feel good as exactly that. So mental health is that rare illness that prevents you from experiencing joy no matter what's going on. You can have other illnesses and still go, hey, that was fun, or wow, I'm so happy that, I had a child or a grandchild, whatever it is. But with depression, for instance, nothing feels good.
So with that said, we all have our good days. Like there's everybody, I shouldn't say we all have their good days because people that have mental health that don't all have good days, and that's unfortunate. But when you have a bad day, one of those days where you don't want to get up and come into the radio station, when you don't want to come up and even think about getting out of bed, what's your steps in the morning when you have those days?
Really the only thing I can do is I can be vigilant with myself on a bad day to say, I can't change it. There's no way that I can make this day better except by accepting it and not fighting it. So, and when I say not fighting it, I mean not lamenting it, not saying why me, not saying woe is me. It's just saying, you know what? This is a bad day. This was determined by my brain chemistry or a greater power or what. It doesn't matter. So it's the acceptance of the bad day that empowers me to get through the day. So if I can accept it, if I can not lament it, and if I can say, essentially, this is what I'm facing, it's not going to be here forever. I've gone through this 1,000 times in the last 10 years, so I know it's going to pass and tomorrow or the next day will be better. Then I just let it be. It's like rain. You can go outside. You can't stop the rain, can you? I don't think so, Dan, but maybe you're the...
No, I don't think it's real possible.
Right. So it's not possible to stop the rain. So I can't stop the depression. But you can stop the rain from hitting you with an umbrella. You can stop the rain from soaking you with a raincoat and rain pants. I do the same with depression. I let it be on me, but not in me. And that is all I can do. And does it make a massive difference? No. Does it make enough of a difference that I feel like I cope better with my bad days now? Absolutely.
So you did Off the Record for almost 20
18.
years?
18.
Yeah, just about 18 years. And you talked to a myriad of people through Off the Record. And we were talking before we got on here about some of the people that have had addictions and stuff that you've spoken with. What would be some of their tips that they shared with you, even though maybe you didn't realize it at the time?
I would say, I mean, I have some really good examples. I mean, one of the first guys that I learned from was Brian McGrattan. Brian McGrattan, I don't know how much into hockey you are. I'm assuming you live in the Sioux that, you know, and if you're not into hockey at all, just bluff at this point. Just say, oh, huge hockey fan. McGrattan played for the Sens, then played, I think he played for the Coyotes. When he was with the Senators, it was known that there was 4 or 5 players on the team that had cocaine problems and alcohol problems. And they eventually broke those guys up. He went out to Arizona and one day walked away from hockey and went into the program. The program is this amazing thing that's offered to NHL players. And I'm very critical of the NHL for they've handled some things like brain injuries and how they've been irresponsible in my mind with concussions and how they haven't done a good job with racism. But when it comes to addiction, when it comes to needing psychological help, they have a great program. And when he got out, he came back on Off the Record. And honestly, Dan, it was like, who are you?
Night and day.
Oh my gosh. He was such a different person. There was always this little bit inside that you could see that you went, I like that guy. But it was dominated by a guy who was a big blowhard, a guy who wasn't terribly respectful to the people around him. And we talked about it. And he said, you know, my life was over until I said, I got to do this. And there's the lesson there is that you have to get to the bottom before you will give up everything in your life, because it's easier to be an addict than it is to go to therapy, to go to try to get clean, because that's pain and that's difficult. And we know how tough that is. So I learned from guys like that the key is to make the help more appealing, to make people understand that, you know, this is not because you're a loser. This is not because you're just weak. This is because you're sick and you need to treat your illness. That's the way my brother was. I said to my brother, why did you drink? My brother's a kidney doctor. You know, he's like a genius. I said, why did you drink from the time you were 16? Why did you do prescription drugs? He said, I thought I was a loser. I just thought I was weak and everyone else could have 2 drinks, but I couldn't. And then he walked into the right psychiatrist's office who said to him, you're never getting over your addiction unless you replace it with something to treat your mental illness. And he put him on an old antidepressant called imipramine. And my brother, this was 20 years ago, never had another drink, never wanted another drink. But if not for walking in the right psychiatrist's office, he'd be dead for sure.
You wouldn't have known. You're watching Between the Lines with Michael Landsberg. We'll be right back. And we're back with Michael Landsberg for one more segment about mental health here. So we're going down this road, and we've had a great discussion so far, but if you have tips, your personal tips for, you come across somebody on the street, you come across somebody and you know they're down, you know they're having a bad day, what do you say to them?
You know, I have those conversations a lot. I have one going on right now. With a young person who, when I say young, like 21 years old, has suffered from terrible anxiety and depression for the last 4 or 5 years. It's basically ruined his life at this point, unless he can find something better. And he's overcome by shame and embarrassment. And my job with him is to empower him to be able to share. And I can do that because I can talk about my own illness. Like I have an entree into somebody's brain because they know I'm not going to judge them. How could I judge you if I've just said that I've experienced the same things? And I think the empowerment to go and fight for your own happiness is by far the most important thing. Because let's face it, if you don't fight for your own happiness. If you don't go and try to find a better way to live your life, then you're not getting better. It's like I say to people, dude, how long you been sick for? Probably a year and a half. I say, well, if you've been for 18 months, every morning you wake up, you felt really crappy, depressed, anxious, all of that, I can promise you tomorrow morning when you wake up, it's going to be the same. So you got to do something. And then, it's such an inexact science, mental illness, right? Depression. There's no one treatment that works for everyone. Some treatments work for no one. And some people got to go, the majority of people got to go like 4 or 5 different treatments to find something that helps. And here's the punchline to what I say is you have to say, I will do anything to get better. And when I say anything, I mean legal things. I don't mean, buying drugs on the street, because that's not going to make you better. But you have to say everything is on the table. Because so often, Dan, I hear people say, oh, I don't believe in medication. I would never talk to anyone about this. If you're sick enough, like I've been, your attitude has to be anything is better than where I am right now. So this table of treatments is full with everything that exists. All the different medications, all the different forms of talk therapy, ECT, deep brain stimulation, magnetic stimulation, all of the newer drugs. Sometimes, they're going to psychedelic drugs now, right? Where there's drugs that were illegal on the street, or club drugs like ketamine, Special K in a club. But to me and people I know, that can be life-saving. So whatever it is, whatever pain you're feeling, you've got to commit to saying, I'll try it all.
So we talk that and we say things like that. We're now headed, unfortunately, probably back into a lockdown. I know in your area in Toronto, you basically are already there. And people are starting to realize, maybe for the first time, that they're dealing with a mental health issue. Like, it doesn't, for you and partly to myself, I can include in this, a mental health issue comes from knowing that you kind of get there. But there's people that are being locked up now, not by their own will, that are maybe starting to realize there's a bit of a mental health issue. What's your first advice before they get really bad and into that big, deep, dark hole?
Okay, well, 2 things. Number 1, a story about that. My son has severe anxiety, exactly like I did when I was a little kid. He had it. He's lived with it. He's found a way to coexist with it. But I do this blog every day called the Daily Lands blog. And when the pandemic first hit, I said to him, so like he has big issues with fearing his own health and his own mortality. And, oh my God, am I sick? Is this a lump in my neck? I said, how you doing with it? He goes, I'm doing fine. I said, I've been living this way for all my life. He goes, I don't have to change. I've always been paranoid about touching things that have germs on them. So this is no change for me at all. But for a lot of people, there's so many things that add up to anxiety, depression, panic, OCD. I call them the garden variety mental illnesses. And my advice is that you got to decide, do I have a problem? And it's not a problem if you say, I'm worried about my job. That's normal. I'm worried about my parents' health. That's normal. If you say, I'm worried about my own health, that's normal. But is it interrupting the quality of your life any more than it should? Like you should be somewhat worried about where we are right now as a planet Earth, right? I mean, you'd have to be delusional not to feel that way. But the question is, and this is really, it comes down to this one question: can you still experience joy?
Yeah.
So when you wake up in the morning, if you say, Michael, I'm really worried, and then the day goes on and I'm pretty down because of this, I go, okay. That sounds like you're reacting to this really crappy time that we're in. But if something good happens to you over the course of that day, where, there's a knock on your door and there's a gift at your door, or if you're 25 and all of a sudden someone just got you the new Nintendo. I believe there is a Nintendo 5. Am I right about that?
Yeah, PS5, but yeah.
PS5.
And
yeah.
I see where you're headed. So we got about 30 seconds, 45 seconds left. Tell me, if people want to get involved with Sick Not Weak, how do they go about doing that?
Just go to sicknotweak.com, go to our Facebook page, follow me and Sick Not Weak on Twitter. That's at Hey Landsberg and Sick Not Weak. And most of all, whether you help out or not, It's all about making a difference in someone else's life. If you have mental health challenges, think about it this way. You get to use the worst thing in your life as one of the best things in your life.
And with that, I'm going to say thank you, and thank you for coming to Between the Lines and watching Between the Lines today. This has been Michael Landsberg of Sick Not Weak, and we will talk again soon. Have a great day.